All right, today we are diving into a text that makes one of the most radical claims you can imagine, that modern Christianity itself is built on a great deception. So we're going to break down exactly what this source means by that. And yeah, this source does not pull any punches. It comes right out of the gate with this absolutely startling claim. It accuses the very system of Christianity of becoming the exact opposite of what it's supposed to be. This one sentence, well, it really sets the stage for everything we're about to unpack. So how in the world do they build a case like that? Well, the entire argument hinges on this idea of identifying what it calls doctrines of devils disguised as light. The core concept here is that the foundational beliefs of Christianity are not at all what they seem, but are actually part of a massive, long-running deception. And the source is very methodical about it. It lists out specific beliefs that it calls the foundational lies of the modern church. So let's get into it. Let's break these down one by one, just as they're presented. Okay, so the first major area this text goes after is established church doctrines. You know, the stuff that makes up the very fabric of worship and teaching for millions and millions of people. First up, the calendar. The source argues that Sunday worship is just plain wrong, an improper replacement for the Sabbath. And it doesn't stop there. It claims that Easter and Christmas aren't holy at all, but are actually repurposed pagan feasts that have snuck their way into the faith. And next, the source takes aim at some huge theological beliefs. The concept of eternal torment in hell, they say it's out. The idea of a secret rapture where believers get to escape, nope, that's a lie too. The teaching that the law is done away with, they challenge that. It even goes so far as to label the entire institution of the church and the story of a war in heaven as myths. From there, the critique moves beyond theology and right into everyday life. The worldview here basically rejects participating in secular society, things like voting or paying taxes. It frames them as collaborating with a corrupt system. And get this, it even redefines tithing, saying it's not about giving money, but about giving obedience. So you might think the critique has hit its peak, right? But nope, the source then introduces this whole other layer, drawing a line between the lies we just covered and something it calls an even deeper corruption of truth. And here, you can really see that distinction. On the left, you've got what the source calls church lies, things like the rapture or Christmas. But look at the right side, under corruption of truth. The claims get way more fundamental. The source says that ideas like the New Testament being invalid or that the Apostle Paul was actually a false apostle, well, that's a whole other level of blasphemy. This quote really just sums it all up. The source is saying that the ultimate results of all these deceptions is that what was once a pure revelation has been twisted and institutionalized into a religion. And in that process, the original truth got flipped completely on its head, turned into blasphemy. So, we've seen the full critique, the whole deconstruction. But this text doesn't just tear things down. It also has its own urgent message. And it starts with a really powerful redefinition of a core concept: hell. Now, this is a big one. According to this worldview, hell isn't some place of fire and brimstone you go to after you die. No, it's a state of being, right here, right now. It's the condition of living in deception, of believing the lie, and in doing so, rejecting truth in the present tense. The whole point is its immediacy. And that completely reframes the consequences, doesn't it? The danger isn't about avoiding some punishment in the future. The real danger, from this perspective, is the spiritual state you're living in right now by accepting what this text calls the Great Deception. And because those stakes are so immediate, the text's conclusion isn't some philosophical suggestion. It is an urgent, flashing red lights, apocalyptic warning to escape this present tense hell before it's too late. And it all boils down to this: a stark, two-word command, followed by a final warning. When you strip away all the complexity, the source's ultimate message is a direct, urgent call to repent, because an imminent day of judgment is coming, what it calls the day of Yahuah, which is another way of rendering the Hebrew name for God. Okay, wow, so we've just journeyed through a pretty intense and, let's face it, very unconventional theological argument. To make sure we've really grasped the full picture of this worldview, let's do a quick recap of the key takeaways. It really breaks down into these 4 logical steps. Step 1, the core accusation that Christianity is a deception. 2, it backs this up with evidence, listing all those doctrines and practices it calls lies. 3, it defines the consequence not as a future punishment, but as living in a present-day hell. And finally, 4, it issues that urgent warning to repent. That's the entire argument right there in a nutshell. So, this leaves us with a final thought to chew on. This entire text, this whole worldview, is built on its own very specific definition of what a deception is. So it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How does an author's framing of what is false challenge your own understanding of what is true?